He was the chief, proud and bold, certain only SEALs could strike the mark. She was the janitor, quiet, unseen, mocked, dismissed, left in the dark. But when the rifle echoed true, and the bullseye shattered pride and scheme, the crowd fell silent, eyes wide open, for the janitor was far more than she seemed. Asterisk, before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell icon so you never miss an inspiring story like this one. Now, let's dive in. The morning sun stretched across the quiet military base, its light glinting off the rows of neatly lined barracks and the tall fence that marked the perimeter. Most of the base was still asleep, except for the hum of an early generator and the occasional shout from a guard on patrol. Inside the weapons training facility, however, a storm of tension was quietly building. Jessica Jess Marlowe moved with practiced precision, her boots barely making a sound on the polished concrete floor. She was a janitor here, yes, but anyone who underestimated her based on her uniform alone would be in for a surprise. Jess had grown up in a small Midwestern town, the daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep the household running. She learned early that the world often judged people on what they appeared to be, not who they actually were. That lesson had shaped her into someone who never flinched in the face of scorn or doubt. She was pushing a mop across the floor when the group of elite shooters entered the hall. The sniper chief, a tall man with a hawkish nose and a voice that cut through the air like a rifle shot, led them. He carried himself with the kind of confidence that only years of accolades and awards could buy. But today, he seemed particularly eager to assert his dominance. "Only SEALs can hit that clean," he said, gesturing toward the far end of the shooting range. The target a small, barely visible bullseye, almost mockingly at the far. The shooters laughed, a low, proud rumble that made Jess's stomach twist. She stopped her cleaning and leaned against the wall, her eyes narrowing slightly. She had watched these men for months, seen them train with relentless discipline, their precision uncanny. Most people would have cowered under their presence. But Jess felt something else, a quiet determination that had been simmering her whole life. She had grown up with a hunting rifle in her hands, the skill passed down by her father before he disappeared from her life. What they saw as a janitor, she knew, didn't define the limits of her talent. "You sure that's wise?" one of the younger recruits asked, glancing at the chief. "Letting civilians." "Silence," the chief barked. "This isn't a debate. No one outside the SEALs can touch this target, and anyone who says otherwise is lying." Jess felt a flicker of something deep in her chest. Anger? Perhaps. Pride? Definitely. She didn't like being dismissed, not ever. And yet, she had learned over the years that showing fire at the wrong time could make things worse. So she stayed quiet, just letting her eyes follow the chief as he strode to the line and picked up a rifle. He lifted it with an ease that spoke of years of practice, his movements almost elegant. The other shooters watched, smirking, murmuring quietly to one another. "See? Nothing but SEAL hands can pull that off." Then he fired. The shot echoed, clean, almost too perfect. The bullseye was hit dead center. The room seemed to exhale collectively, admiration and smugness mixing in equal measure. "Exactly what I said?" the chief said, turning to his team with a victorious grin. "No one but us can do that." Jess's jaw tightened. She stepped forward almost instinctively, but the chief's sharp eyes caught her movement. "And who's this?" he demanded, his tone cutting like a whip. "A janitor trying to play marksman? This isn't a carnival." I just," Jess started, but he waved her off. "Save it," he snapped. "Some of us have trained for years. Don't think a mop and bucket make you a sharpshooter." The other men laughed, louder this time, their amusement ringing hollow in Jess's ears. She felt a sting she hadn't expected. Not because of the words, but because of the dismissive certainty behind them, the assumption that someone like her could never be capable of greatness. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe slowly. She had faced harder challenges than this in her life. Rejection, poverty, loss, all of it. And yet, something about this moment made her blood hum with quiet defiance. She knew she could do it. She had to. The chief, satisfied with his display of superiority, began to lecture the recruits on proper stance and trigger control. Jess stayed to the side, watching, listening, and letting her mind replay every detail of the shot. Every nuance, the way he held the rifle, the angle of his shoulders, the rhythm of his breathing. She noticed things the others didn't. Small, subtle adjustments that could make all the difference. Later, when the range cleared and the echoes of the SEAL's laughter faded, Jess returned to her routine. But she couldn't shake the image of the target, hanging there, smug in its perfection, daring her to challenge it. She knew it wasn't about pride anymore. It was about proving to herself first, and everyone else second, that skill and determination mattered more than titles or uniforms. And somewhere deep inside, she felt the first stirrings of a plan. Not just to compete, but to show, once and for all, that she was not someone to be underestimated. She cleaned the floor methodically, each sweep of the mop a meditation, each movement a silent vow. She would train. She would practice in secret, using every ounce of knowledge she had from years of quiet observation. And when the time came, she would step up to that line, and nothing would surprise anyone more than the janitor who could shoot like a seal dot by the time she finished. The sun had fully risen, casting long shadows across the base. The air smelled of oil, metal, and the faint tongue of gunpowder, a smell that would become familiar in the days to come. Jess walked out of the building, her mop and bucket in hand, but her mind already racing ahead, planning, calculating, preparing. This was not the end of the story. This was the beginning. The days that followed were both monotonous and electric for Jess. By day, she moved quietly through the base, broom in hand, blending into the background while absorbing everything she could about the shooters she had just faced. By night, however, she became someone else, entirely a student of precision, a shadow in the small, unused firing range tucked behind the old supply shed. She had discovered it by accident, a leftover from a bygone era when the base had trained recruits in less regulated ways. Dusty and dim, it was perfect. No one went there anymore, and the walls, lined with old plywood targets, absorbed sound so that shots could be fired without disturbing the main training schedule. Her first few attempts were humiliating. She was used to hunting rifles in the open fields of her youth, but the sleek SEAL rifles were heavier, more exacting, and demanded a discipline she hadn't yet mastered. The first shots went wide, clattering against the walls or embedding in the corners of the target. She cursed under her breath, her frustration mounting, but she refused to quit. Jess's determination was fueled by more than pride. She remembered the sneer on the chief's face, the easy laughter of the men who assumed she was incapable. Every insult had landed like a pebble in her chest, but now each became fuel. She spent hours adjusting her stance, measuring her breathing, and observing the mechanics of her shots. She took careful notes on the rhythm of pulling the trigger, the balance of her shoulders, even the way her heartbeat spiked with each squeezed sleep. Became a scarce commodity. She trained after her shifts and woke before dawn to practice again. The other janitors and civilians on base barely noticed her increasing fatigue, seeing only the routine movements of a woman performing an ordinary job. But inside her, a storm of focus was building, a singular obsession that left no room for doubt. Yet, training alone came with its setbacks. There were nights when the recoil made her shoulder ache so badly she could barely lift her arm the next day. There were mornings when the target seemed impossibly small, mocking her from the dim light of the range. And there were times when doubt crept in, a quiet whisper that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't cut out for this world. It was during one of those moments, when her shots kept missing the bullseye by mere millimeters, that she remembered her mother's words. Strength isn't about never falling, Jess. It's about getting back up every single time. She gritted her teeth, wiped the sweat and dust from her brow, and lined up the rifle once more. Her first clean shot came late one night, the echo bouncing softly off the empty walls. She barely allowed herself to breathe before checking the target, dead center. It was the smallest of victories, but to her, it felt monumental. A spark of confidence ignited, and with it, a vision of what was possible. As the weeks passed, Jess's skills improved dramatically. She learned to anticipate the rifle's kick, to steady her breathing, and to make subtle adjustments that even seasoned shooters often overlooked. She began experimenting with angles and distances, each attempt pushing her abilities further. Slowly, she started to feel the familiar exhilaration that came with mastery, the quiet, almost meditative focus that allowed her mind and body to act as one. Despite her growing proficiency, she remained careful to avoid detection. The chief and his SEALs were notoriously observant. A single misstep could expose her, and she wasn't ready to face their ridicule or worse until she was certain of her victory. But the base was full of obstacles. Supplies were limited. The dusty range had to be cleared of cobwebs and old debris, and she sometimes had to navigate around surprise inspections. On more than one occasion, she hid behind crates as the chief's team passed by, hearts hammering, praying they wouldn't notice the faint glimmer of her rifle or the shadow of her movements. Each near discovery added to her tension, sharpening her focus and reinforcing her resolve. It wasn't just physical challenges that tested her. Emotionally, Jess had to wrestle with isolation. She couldn't share her secret with anyone. Her colleagues would dismiss it, her mother would worry, and the SEALs would mock her. Each night, after training, she returned to her small dorm room, exhausted but unsatisfied, her mind replaying each shot, each adjustment, each inch closer to perfection. Her inner strength became her closest ally. She began to visualize the moment when she would finally step onto the firing line, the bullseye waiting at the far end, and the chief's smug expression. She imagined the gasp of surprise, the silence that would follow, the slow realization that skill could come from anywhere, not just those with titles, medals, or recognition. Then, one evening, everything shifted. A sudden gust of wind rattled the old shed door, and she froze mid-shot. She wasn't alone. A shadow moved in the corner of her vision, another person, someone who had been following her quiet footsteps across the base. "Jess?" a voice asked, hesitant, almost disbelieving. She lowered the rifle cautiously, recognizing the newcomer. It was Sam, a former SEAL who had retired quietly and now worked on maintenance around the base. Unlike the others, he carried no airs of superiority, no sneers or mocking smirks. He simply looked curious, concerned, and somehow supportive. "I didn't know anyone was here," Jess said, her voice tight with tension. Sam raised his hands in surrender. "I wasn't here to get you in trouble. I've seen what you're doing. And I think you might actually have a gift." Her heart raced. For weeks, she had trained in secrecy, believing she was entirely alone. To have someone acknowledge her skill, even tentatively, was both thrilling and terrifying. "You think I can really do it?" she asked quietly, her voice betraying the slightest tremor of doubt. "I do," Sam said firmly. "But it's not just about the rifle. It's about confidence, strategy, and patience. You've got the hands for it, now you just need the mind." With his guidance, Jess began to refine her technique further. Sam taught her advanced drills, ways to steady her body and focus her mind, and perhaps most importantly, methods to anticipate the psychological game the SEALs would play. The combination of her raw talent, relentless practice, and his mentorship pushed her closer to the point where she could challenge even the elite shooters on the base dot by the end of that month. Jess's skill had reached a level that few could. Believe she could hit the bullseye consistently, under pressure, at varying distances. Every shot she fired felt intentional, precise, and controlled. And though she hadn't yet revealed herself, the quiet thrill of impending triumph pulsed in her veins. But she also knew the greatest challenge wasn't her aim. It was the moment she would step out of the shadows and face the judgment of those who had doubted her. That confrontation, she realized, would test her courage far more than the rifle ever could. And deep down, Jess was ready. The following Monday, the base was buzzing with activity. The SEALs were scheduled for a demonstration of precision shooting, an event that drew higher-ranking officers and visiting dignitaries. The sniper chief was at the center of it all, preening. In his polished uniform, chest swelling with pride as he gave instructions to his team, Jess watched from her usual vantage point, pretending to mop the floor nearby while her heart raced. Every fiber of her body ached with anticipation. This was the day she had been training for, though she hadn't revealed her plans to anyone, not even Sam. The chief stepped up to the firing line, rifle in hand, and addressed the small crowd. "What you're about to see is the best the Navy SEALs can offer," he boomed, his voice echoing through the range. "Precision, discipline, excellence. Only we can hit that clean, and I guarantee you'll see it today." The crowd nodded, murmuring in agreement. Jess felt her stomach twist not with fear, but with the familiar mix of determination and anticipation. The SEALs began their demonstration, each shot precise, almost mechanical. The crowd gasped in admiration, the chief's smug grin widening. With every perfect hit, Jess's chest tightened with a mixture of envy and resolve. She had spent weeks reaching this exact level of skill, and now it was time to see how the SEALs would react to someone they least expected. Her opportunity came when an unexpected mishap forced a brief pause in the demonstration. A target misaligned, and the chief stepped aside to adjust it. Jess took a deep breath, her palms slightly trembling, and quietly moved toward the line. She wasn't supposed to be there. Everyone assumed she was just a janitor, a ghost in the night background. But she had rehearsed this moment endlessly. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear but firm. Heads turned, and laughter rippled across the range. "I'd like to try a shot." The chief spun toward her, eyes narrowing, disbelief etched into every line of his face. "What did you say?" "I want to try," Jess repeated. She kept her tone calm, even as her pulse pounded in her ears. The room erupted in laughter. "Hey, janitor? Shoot?" One of the SEALs snorted. Another added, "You'll hit the wall before the target." The chief's voice cut through the noise, cold and sharp. "Step aside. This isn't for civilians. You have no place here." Jess stood tall, meeting his gaze without flinching. She could feel every eye on her, the weight of expectation and ridicule pressing down. But she didn't waver. She had trained for this moment, prepared every detail, and now it was time to prove herself. Sam stepped forward, silently offering a nod of support. That small gesture steadied her more than she realized. "I don't need permission," Jess said firmly. "Just watch." The chief's lips pressed into a thin line. He waved reluctantly, clearly expecting failure, perhaps even humiliation for her audacity. The SEALs smirked, muttering under their breath, certain of her incompetence. Jess lifted the rifle, adjusted her stance, and focused entirely on the bullseye. The crowd seemed to fade, the air around her tightening, every muscle coiled like a spring. She breathed in, held, and fired. The shot rang out, echoing sharply across the range. The target shivered, and then dead center. A hush fell over the crowd, eyes widened, jaws slackened. The chief's expression froze, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and anger. "Impossible," he muttered under his breath, stepping closer to inspect the target. But the proof was undeniable. The shot was clean, flawless, impossible to ignore. Jess lowered the rifle, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She didn't smile, not yet. She simply waited, letting the silence speak. For her, the chief's team, still recovering from the shock, began to murmur among themselves. Did she just? One whispered. Another shook his head, muttering under his breath, "No way." The chief's voice finally broke the silence, sharp and incredulous. "Step back," he barked. "This isn't how who trained you." "I trained myself," Jess said simply. "And a friend helped me refine technique, but this was my work." The chief's face went red, his pride wounded. He glanced at the visiting officers, then back at Jess, unable to find words that matched the magnitude of what had just happened. For the first time, the laughter of the SEALs stopped. Their smirks faded, replaced by a mixture of awe and reluctant respect. Jess could feel their eyes on her, not with ridicule, but with recognition that skill could come from the most unexpected places. The visiting officers stepped forward, impressed and curious. One of them, a stern woman in her 50s, asked, "Who are you?" "Jessica Marlowe," she replied calmly. "I work on the base, maintaining facilities." The word janitor was unspoken, but implied in the crowd's stunned faces. The chief could only clench his fists, realizing that he had been outshone in front of witnesses he could not control. Jess knew this was only the beginning. She had proven she could match them, but respect wasn't freely given. It had to be earned through continued excellence. And she was ready. As the crowd dispersed, Sam approached her, a quiet smile on his face. "You did it," he said simply. "You didn't just hit the target. You made them see you." Jess allowed herself a small, private smile. A satisfaction of victory was real, but tempered by the knowledge that she had only begun to break the walls of expectation. The sniper chief, meanwhile, retreated to his office, his mind racing. For the first time in years, he had been confronted with someone who challenged his assumptions. And it stung not because he had lost, but because the loss had been public, undeniable, and impossible to dismiss. Jess cleaned up quietly afterward, moving through the range as though nothing had happened. But inside, her confidence bloomed like a quiet fire. She had faced mockery, ridicule, and disbelief, and she had emerged unbroken. In that moment, she understood something essential. Skill wasn't about titles, rank, or uniforms. It was about dedication, heart, and the courage to stand when others expected you to fall. And Jess Marlowe, the janitor who no one believed in, had already begun to rewrite the rules. After her stunning demonstration, life on the base shifted in subtle but undeniable ways. The once dismissive glances from the SEALs now carried a mixture of curiosity and caution. The sniper chief, however, remained the hardest obstacle. His pride had been publicly bruised, and while he could not openly challenge Jess without appearing petty, every interaction was now laced with subtle hostility. Jess returned to her routine, but nothing felt routine anymore. Every sweep of the mop, every turn of a wrench, was shadowed by the awareness that she had made her mark, and that some were still determined to see her fail. In the following weeks, new drills were announced. The SEALs were to engage in a competitive series, testing not just accuracy, but timing, judgment, and adaptability. The chief, eyes flicking toward Jess whenever she passed, issued a thinly veiled challenge. "We'll see if that single shot Was luck, he muttered under his breath, making sure she could hear. One hit doesn't make a sharpshooter. Jess felt a surge of resolve. Luck had nothing to do with her performance. Every hour, every sacrifice, every ounce of effort had led to that moment. She would not back down, nor would she allow herself to be intimidated now her secret training intensified. Sam continued to provide guidance, showing her techniques that went beyond the basics. Advanced sighting, controlling subtle hand tremors, and mental exercises to maintain calm under pressure. The sessions were grueling, often leaving Jess physically drained and emotionally stretched. But she thrived on the challenge, finding strength in the discipline and focus it demanded. Yet the base was not free from petty sabotage. One morning, she arrived at the shed to find her targets mysteriously misaligned, some even damaged. Her heart sank briefly, realizing the lengths to which someone likely a SEAL, unwilling to accept her skill, had gone to undermine her. She refused to be shaken. Repairing the targets took hours, but she did it silently, methodically, the repetition reinforcing her patience and resolve. Then came the day of the competitive drills. The SEALs lined up as usual, their rifles gleaming, movements precise and confident. Jess approached quietly, carrying her own weapon, cleaned and prepared with meticulous care. The chief's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "I'm competing," Jess replied simply, her voice steady. A ripple of disbelief ran through the group. "This isn't a contest for civilians," someone protested. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's see who can hit the target." The drills began. The SEALs executed with practiced precision, moving through the exercises with efficiency and skill honed over years. Jess observed them carefully, anticipating their strategies, noting weaknesses, and waiting for her moment. Her turn came. The target was smaller this time, positioned at a more challenging distance, with obstacles that tested judgment and adaptability. Jess steadied her breathing, letting the world fade. Every lesson she had learned over weeks of training surged forward. Stance, grip, focus, patience. The first shot went clean, hitting the edge of the bullseye. Whispers ran through the crowd. The second shot landed dead center. The chief's jaw tightened. For the first time, he seemed visibly unnerved. Jess continued, one shot after another, each more precise than the last. By the end of the series, Jess had not only matched the SEALs, but, in several drills, surpassed them. Her timing was impeccable, her adaptability flawless. The crowd, previously skeptical, erupted into murmurs of astonishment. Afterward, officers and senior staff approached her, offering congratulations and praise. It was the first time she truly felt recognized, not just for her skill, but for the dedication and resilience that had brought her there. Yet the emotional weight of the journey was not lost on her. She had been mocked, underestimated, and even sabotaged. The satisfaction of victory was intertwined with a quiet sense of vindication. But Jess knew this was more than personal triumph. It was a lesson to everyone watching that skill and determination could come from anywhere, regardless of rank, title, or appearance. The chief, still seething, avoided direct confrontation, but his demeanor had changed. Jess could sense a grudging respect behind the tight lines of his face. He may never admit it, but she had forced him to acknowledge a truth he could not ignore. Talent and courage were not the exclusive domain of the elite. That night, Jess returned to her quarters, exhausted but fulfilled. She reflected on the journey. So far, the isolation, the late-night training, the moments of doubt, and the small victories that had built into this undeniable accomplishment. She understood now that strength was not simply physical skill, it was emotional resilience, the courage to persist, and the unwavering belief in oneself, even when others tried to deny it. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sam. "You made them see. Now make them respect it. Tomorrow, we push further. Jess smiled faintly. The road ahead was still challenging, but she no longer feared it. She had proven herself in public, but she knew the greatest test, the ultimate demonstration of her abilities, was yet to come, and she would meet it head on. The base was quiet in the early morning, but Jess felt the storm inside her. Today was the culmination of everything she had worked for, the final challenge. The sniper chief had arranged a live demonstration for visiting commanders and high-ranking officials, showcasing the precision and skill of his SEAL team. Jess knew the stakes were higher than ever. One misstep, one slip of concentration, and she could be dismissed, ridiculed, or worse, erased from memory as an anomaly rather than acknowledged as a true sharpshooter. She checked her rifle for the bolts of the 10th time, methodically inspecting the barrel, the sights, and the trigger mechanism. Every detail mattered, and she had already honed her aim to near perfection. But nerves, she realized, were her only real opponent now. The weight of expectations, both her own and those silently observing, pressed down on her chest like a physical burden. Sam had arrived early, a calm presence among the tension. "You've got this," he said, offering her a small, encouraging nod. "You've trained harder than anyone here. Trust yourself." Jess nodded, taking a deep breath. She recalled the nights spent in the dusty range, the countless missed shots, the small victories that had built her confidence. All of it converged into this moment. The sniper chief approached, his polished uniform gleaming, his expression unreadable. "Ready to embarrass yourself in front of everyone?" He sneered, though there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Ready," Jess replied evenly, her voice calm and steady. The demonstration began. One by one, the SEALs took their shots. Each hit the target with near-perfect accuracy, eliciting murmurs of approval and admiration from the assembled officers. Jess watched closely, analyzing their movements, their breathing, the subtle shifts in stance that made their shots so precise. She noted the patterns, preparing herself to integrate everything she had learned with her own instincts. When it was finally her turn, a hush fell over the crowd. Eyes, skeptical at first, now carried a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. The chief's jaw tightened, his pride visibly bruised, as he reluctantly nodded for her to step forward. Jess positioned herself at the line, her mind clearing of everything except the target ahead. She adjusted her stance, steadied her breathing, and focused on the bullseye. Every muscle in her body was aligned, every thought centered on the moment. The first shot rang out dead center. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that filled the silence with awe. Jess didn't smile. She didn't need to. She simply continued, each shot landing with unerring precision, each more confident than the last. The sniper chief watched, stunned. He had trained men for years, expecting perfection from them. And yet this woman, this janitor, was outperforming his elite team in front of witnesses who could never be swayed by rank alone. Whispers rippled through the onlookers. "Did she just?" One murmured. "I've never seen shots that clean," another said, disbelief in their voice. Jess's final shot hit the target dead center again, and a profound silence enveloped the range. The chief stepped forward, face pale, unable to mask the mix of anger, shock, and begrudging respect. Jess lowered her rifle, calm and steady, and let the moment linger. She didn't need to speak. The target and her skill spoke for her. Finally, one of the visiting commanders approached. "I've seen many sharpshooters in my career," he said slowly, eyes on Jess. "Few can claim such precision under pressure. Miss Marlowe, your talent is extraordinary." The crowd erupted in applause. The SEALs, initially smirking and dismissive, now nodded, some even offering tentative smiles of respect. The sniper chief's expression softened slightly, the realization sinking in that he could no longer deny her ability. Sam, approached her quietly afterward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it. You've earned their respect, and then some." Jess exhaled slowly, the tension draining from her body. She had not only proven her skill, but had also confronted the deeper challenge she had carried from the beginning, the need to be seen, to be recognized, and to rise above those who underestimated her. The chief lingered for a moment, then approached her. "I misjudged you," he said quietly, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance. "You're remarkable." Jess met his gaze evenly. "Thank you," she replied, letting the acknowledgment settle naturally. She didn't need more. The journey, the struggle, and the silent victories had already spoken louder than any words could. That evening, as the sun set over the base, painting the sky with warm golds and reds, Jess reflected on everything she had endured. The ridicule, the isolation, the late nights, and the constant self-doubt, all of it had shaped her into someone stronger, someone capable of standing unwavering. In the face of skepticism and prejudice, she had faced not just external challenges, but internal ones as well. Fear, self-doubt, and the weight of expectations had tested her resilience, but she had met them with courage, discipline, and patience. And in doing so, she had achieved something far greater than a perfect shot. She had claimed her rightful place in a world that had doubted her. The sniper chief, meanwhile, retreated to his office, quietly reflecting on the lessons learned. He had been reminded that skill, dedication, and courage could come from anywhere, and that assumptions based on appearances were dangerous. He had witnessed firsthand that true talent could not be constrained by rank, status, or title. As Jess cleaned her equipment later that night, the quiet hum of the base around her, she felt a sense of completion, of balance restored. She had proven herself not through arrogance or aggression, but through unwavering focus, determination, and integrity. She had earned respect, not demanded it, and for the first time in a long while, Jess allowed herself to feel entirely, beautifully victorious. The following morning, the base had returned to its usual rhythm, but nothing felt ordinary to Jess. Her victory from the day before lingered like an invisible aura around her, subtle but undeniable. Officers, SEALs, and staff now greeted her with polite nods, some even offering small smiles that conveyed recognition and respect. It was a different world than the one she had entered months ago, a world where she was no longer overlooked. Yet, Jess remained humble. She continued her daily routine, sweeping floors and maintaining facilities, because she understood something vital. Recognition did not define her. Her skill, her resilience, and her character were what mattered. The applause and accolades were gratifying, but they were secondary to the satisfaction of knowing she had faced skepticism, ridicule, and even sabotage and emerged stronger. Sniper Chief approached her quietly one afternoon. His expression was softer than it had ever been. There was no arrogance, no sneer, only acknowledgement. "Jessica," he said, pausing briefly as if measuring his words, "I've trained some of the best marksmen in the country, but you've taught me something too. Skill isn't about rank or title. It's about heart, focus, and courage. I misjudged you, and I apologize for that." Jess looked at him calmly. "Thank you. That means more than you know." For the first time, the chief smiled genuinely. It was a rare gesture, unburdened by pride or competition. In that moment, a bridge was formed, a mutual understanding that transcended rank or status. Even the SEALs who had once laughed at her now treated her differently. Some sought her advice on technique, intrigued by the precision and patience she had demonstrated. Jess shared her insights quietly, careful to remain approachable and grounded, showing that true confidence does not demand dominance over others. Yet the greatest moment of vindication came unexpectedly. During a routine base inspection, Jess overheard a conversation among visiting officials who had watched her demonstration. They spoke in hushed tones, clearly impressed. "She's extraordinary," one said. "Her skill and composure under pressure." "I've never seen anything like it," the other nodded. "And to think she's a janitor. Imagine the talent we've been overlooking all this time." Jess allowed herself a small, private smile. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about the quiet satisfaction of having been right about herself all along. Life on the base slowly returned to normal, but Jess knew she had changed. She moved through her day with a calm confidence, no longer weighed down by the need to justify her presence or talent. She had earned her place not by demanding it, but by demonstrating it, quietly and consistently, against every expectation. Weeks later, the sniper chief organized an official award ceremony, recognizing outstanding skill across the base. When Jess's name was called, a murmur of surprise ran through the audience. She stepped forward, calm and poised, and received a formal commendation for her exceptional marksmanship and dedication. The applause that followed was loud and heartfelt, and Jess felt an emotional warmth, unlike anything she had experienced before. She realized that this acknowledgement, while important, was only a symbol of something deeper, the triumph of persistence, resilience, and integrity. After the ceremony, she walked through the base grounds, reflecting on her journey. Every late night in the dusty range, every skeptical glance, every whispered insult, all of it had led to this moment. And now, the impossible had become reality. A janitor, underestimated and dismissed, had outshot some of the most elite marksmen in the country. She paused by the edge of the shooting range, a sun setting behind the distant hills, casting golden light across the targets. In that quiet moment, she thought of her mother, who had taught her to stand tall, work hard, and believe in herself even when the world said she couldn't. Jess whispered a silent thanks, knowing she had made her mother proud. From the shadows, Sam appeared, nodding at her with a quiet smile. "You did it, Jess. You didn't just surprise them. You changed the way they see the world." Jess smiled back, a mix of pride and serenity in her expression. "I suppose some lessons are harder to learn than others," she said softly. "But I think they'll remember this one." The sniper chief joined them briefly, nodding in a silent gesture of respect. For once, words were unnecessary. Jess had earned not just recognition, but the respect of even those who had doubted her most. As she walked back to her quarters, she felt a quiet strength settle in her chest. The journey had been long, grueling, and emotionally taxing, but it had proven one unshakable truth. Courage, determination, and skill are not defined by appearance, title, or rank. They are defined by the heart and the willingness to persevere. And Jessica Marlowe, a janitor who everyone underestimated, had proven that the impossible could be achieved with patience, discipline, and unwavering self-belief. She had rewritten the rules without needing to shout or demand attention. Her victory was complete, silent, and profoundly satisfying, a triumph of character over prejudice, skill over assumption, and heart over doubt. The sun dipped fully below the horizon, bathing the base in twilight. Jess paused one last time, looking out at the targets she had conquered. She knew the road ahead would always hold challenges, but she was ready for whatever came next. The world had finally seen her, and, more importantly, she had seen herself. And in that quiet, golden moment, Jessica Marlowe smiled.